Open the door. I slammed my palm against the glass, but my father didn't even turn around. Snow packed around my bare feet, while the wind cut straight through the thin sweater I'd worn to Christmas dinner. The thermometer beside the porch read degrees C. Inside, Dad carried a stack of presents toward the tree like nothing had happened. Mom glanced toward me. "Richard, she's freezing. She can come back inside when she learns respect." Then Dad looked directly at me through the window and pulled the curtain shut. "My name is Melani Carter. I'm 27, an architectural engineer, and for years I had convinced myself that keeping peace with my father was easier than challenging him. That lie had just put me outside barefoot on Christmas Eve. Less than an hour earlier, we had been eating dinner when Dad casually said, "The house is sold. We'll start packing after New Year's." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Sold? Yes. But what about the trust?" The entire table went silent. Weeks earlier, I had accidentally seen legal correspondence addressed to the Carter Family Property Trust. Dad had snatched it away before I could read much. Now his jaw tightened. "Don't start. I'm asking because you said the house is completely yours. If that's true, why are lawyers writing to a trust?" Dad pushed back his chair. "You always have to challenge me." "I'm not challenging you. I'm asking a question." "Apologize." "For what?" That was all it took. He grabbed my phone from beside my plate, marched to the back door, and pointed outside. "You want to act disrespectful in my house? Get out of it." I thought he was bluffing. He was. The lock clicked behind me. Now, nearly an hour later, my fingers were so numb I could barely bend them. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see Ethan opening a present while Mom sat rigidly beside him. Then headlights swept across the snow. A long black limousine rolled slowly into our driveway. I stared confused. The rear door opened. An elderly woman stepped out in an expensive dark coat, looked toward me, and froze. My breath caught. I knew that face. Grandma. Eleanor Carter stared at me as if she'd seen a ghost. The problem was, according to my father, she was the one who had been dead for 2 years. And when she turned toward our house, her expression changed completely. If my grandmother was alive, what exactly had Dad been hiding? Grandma didn't ask another question until she reached me. She pulled off her coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. "What happened to your shoes?" I pointed toward the house. "Inside." "Your phone." Dad took it. Her eyes moved from my bare feet to the locked door. Then back to me. "You've been standing out here like this." I swallowed. "Almost an hour." For the first time, her face changed. Not shock. Anger. But the question crushing everything else finally came out. "You're alive." Grandma went still. "Who told you I was?" I looked at the house. "Dad." That answer seemed to confirm something she had already feared. She didn't explain. Instead, she took my arm and led me toward the limousine. "Get warm first." Her driver opened the door, turned the heat higher, and handed me a thick blanket. I climbed inside, still staring at Grandma like she might disappear if I blinked. Through the windshield, I saw movement behind our curtains. Dad had finally noticed the limousine. A few seconds later, the front door opened. He stepped onto the porch. And the second he saw Grandma, everything in his face collapsed. He wasn't confused. He wasn't stunned. He knew exactly who she was. That realization hurt more than the cold. Dad knew she was alive. Grandma walked toward him. "Bring Melani's coat, shoes, and phone." Dad recovered quickly. "Mother, this is a family matter." She's sitting in my car with numb feet. She was outside for 5 minutes. I heard that through the cracked limousine door. I looked down at the phone when Dad finally brought it out. A notification timestamp sat on the screen. 58 minutes. I stepped from the car, wearing Grandma's coat. 5 minutes. Dad avoided my eyes. Grandma looked at him. Why haven't you answered my attorneys? Dad stiffened. This is my house. Grandma turned toward me. Did he tell you that? I nodded slowly. Dad cut in. Stop discussing private business with my daughter. Private business. Not family business. Grandma opened her handbag. Inside was a thick legal envelope. Across the front were the exact words I had seen weeks earlier. Carter Family Property Trust. Dad stepped forward fast. Give me that. He reached for it. Grandma pulled the envelope back before he could touch it. Then she looked directly at me. You already lied to her about my death. Dad's face went pale. Grandma held the envelope against her chest. Should I tell her what else you lied about? The front door opened before Dad could answer. Mom stepped onto the porch with Ethan behind her. Richard, she said, staring at Grandma, what is going on? Ethan looked like he'd forgotten how to speak. Grandma. Across the street, curtains were moving. The limousine, raised voices, and 4 people standing outside on Christmas Eve had already attracted attention. Dad noticed too. And just like that, his tone changed. This is ridiculous, he said. My mother has been estranged from this family for years. She shows up without warning and suddenly everyone acts like I'm the criminal. Grandma didn't react. She simply asked, who bought the house? Dad's eyes narrowed. That's none of your concern. It becomes my concern when you claim to have sold property you may not have authority to sell. Mom turned sharply toward him. May not have authority. Dad pointed at Grandma. Don't listen to her. The sale is already done. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. At dinner, you said the house had been sold. Melani, stay out of this. That's why you threw me outside. I asked about the trust. Grandma took out her phone. She called someone and switched to speaker. A man answered almost immediately. Mrs. Carter. Daniel, I'm at the property. Richard says he has completed a sale. Has the trust authorized any transfer? There was a short pause. No, absolutely not. Dad's jaw tightened. The attorney continued. We are aware Mr. Carter signed a preliminary agreement representing himself as having authority over the property. He does not have authorization from the Carter Family Property Trust to complete that transaction. Mom stared at Dad. You told us you own this house. The paperwork is outdated. Grandma extended one hand. Then show us your deed. Dad said nothing. Show Melani the document proving you are the sole owner. I don't have to prove anything in front of my children. That answer was enough. Suddenly, I understood why one question at dinner had made him explode. It had never been about respect. I had gotten too close to something he needed hidden. Ethan stepped forward. Dad, why did you tell us Grandma died? Dad spun toward me instead. Look what you've done. You've turned Christmas into an interrogation. I asked one question. And you never know when to stop. Enough, Grandma said. Dad fell silent. She faced Mom and Ethan. Years ago, Richard came dangerously close to losing this property because of unpaid debts. I intervened. The property was placed under the Carter Family Property Trust, and I allowed your family to remain here under specific conditions. Mom covered her mouth. Grandma continued. Richard was never free to secretly sell it. Headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. Another car pulled in. 2 people in formal coats stepped out carrying document cases. Dad recognized them immediately. Whatever argument he had prepared disappeared. One of them approached the porch. Mrs. Carter. Then he looked directly at Dad. Mr. Carter, we need to discuss the redevelopment notice you've been hiding from your family. Christmas stopped. The presents stayed beneath the tree, half opened. The music was switched off. Minutes later, we were all sitting around the same dining table where Dad had ordered me to apologize earlier. Except now Grandma's attorneys were sitting there too. One opened a document case. Mr. Carter received the first redevelopment notice months ago. Mom stared at Dad. Redevelopment. Dad folded his arms. It wasn't finalized. The attorney placed another document on the table. Then you received this. A second page followed. And this. Another. Inspection requests, occupancy notices, redevelopment correspondence. I stared at the papers. Suddenly, little things I had ignored started fitting together. The trust envelope Dad had snatched away. Mail disappearing before anyone else could collect it. His sudden urgency to sell the house. And his fury when I asked one simple question. Grandma remained standing. Tell them, Richard. Dad looked at her. You came here wanting to humiliate me. No, I came because my attorneys discovered you were attempting to transfer trust property without authorization. The attorney nodded. You also repeatedly denied inspectors access despite having no authority to cancel the scheduled inspections. Dad pushed his chair back. I've lived here for years. That does not make you the sole legal owner. Mom's voice cut through the room. Did you know your mother was alive? Dad froze. Nobody moved. Richard. He rubbed his forehead. Yes. Ethan stared at him. You knew. She had a medical emergency overseas. Afterward, she disappeared from our lives. Grandma's expression remained cold. I was recovering. You abandoned us. So you told your children I died. Dad looked away. I wanted everyone to move forward. I leaned toward him. Then why did you stop us from contacting her? Silence. You told me there was nobody left to contact. You said her affairs had been handled. Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Grandma's attorney slid another document across the table. The existing residence is part of an approved redevelopment project. Mr. Carter received notice that the property would eventually need to be vacated. Mom slowly turned toward Dad. You knew we were going to have to leave. Dad's face tightened. I was trying to protect us. By selling something that wasn't yours, Ethan asked. Dad slammed his palm against the table. I was trying to get something before they took everything. There it was. The first piece he hadn't meant to admit. Grandma looked at him without blinking. The attorney explained that Dad's attempted sale had only accelerated scrutiny because he had represented trust-controlled property as personally owned. I looked toward the window. An hour earlier, I had been standing on the other side of that glass, barefoot in the snow, while Dad opened presents inside a house he already knew he was losing. He hadn't locked me outside because I embarrassed him. He locked me outside because my question threatened his plan. Grandma walked to the window. She looked across the old structure slowly. Dad stood. Mother, don't do something because you're angry. She turned. This decision wasn't made tonight. Dad's confidence vanished. Grandma looked toward her attorney. Then she pointed toward the house. One word left her mouth. Demolish. Dad actually laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the nervous, disbelieving laugh of someone waiting for everyone else to admit this had gone too far. Demolish, he repeated. You're going to tear down an entire house because Melani and I had an argument. Grandma turned from the window. No, Richard, the demolition was approved months ago. One of the attorneys opened another folder. No bulldozers are coming tonight, he said. The property must first be vacated according to the required notice period. Inspections, utility disconnections, permitting, and site preparation will follow. He placed the redevelopment documents in front of Dad. You received notice of every stage. Mom picked up one of the pages. Her eyes moved across it before stopping on a date. This was months ago. Dad said nothing. Grandma sat opposite me. Then, finally, she told us everything. Years earlier, Dad's financial problems had pushed the family property dangerously close to being lost. Grandma had stepped in, settled the secured debt, and consolidated the house and surrounding land into the Carter Family Property Trust. Dad and Mom were allowed to continue living there. But Dad did not own the property outright, and Grandma had made sure he could never gamble its future away again. There was also a succession arrangement, Grandma said. Dad immediately looked at me. That reaction told me the answer before she said it. Grandma continued. Melani was named as the next family beneficiary, with oversight rights once I formally activated the transition. I stared at her. Me? Yes. Dad pushed away from the table. She's 27. And she knows nothing about managing property like this. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I'm an architectural engineer. That doesn't mean. Richard, Grandma interrupted, this is exactly why the trust exists. Dad stopped. Grandma explained what happened 2 years earlier. She had suffered a serious medical emergency overseas. She survived. Recovery took time, and during that period, her legal team discovered irregular attempts to gain access to trust-controlled assets. Those attempts led back toward Dad. So while Grandma recovered, she remained away and allowed her attorneys to investigate. Dad discovered she had survived. Then he made a decision that changed everything. He told us she was dead. Mom lowered the document in her hands. You stood in this room and told us your mother had died. Dad looked at her. You don't understand what she was doing to me. Ethan shook his head. What does that have to do with lying to us? Dad had no answer. Grandma continued. He discouraged us from contacting her business associates. He intercepted correspondence connected to the trust. When redevelopment plans began moving forward, he realized his occupancy, and whatever influence he believed came with this house was approaching its end. So he tried to arrange a private sale. Before Grandma could stop him. Before I could discover the trust. Before anyone learned, I had a protected interest in what happened next. I looked at Dad. So when I mentioned the trust at dinner, his eyes dropped. That was why he exploded. Not because I had talked back. Because I had accidentally touched the center of a lie he had spent 2 years protecting. Mom slowly removed her wedding ring. Dad noticed. Diane. She placed it on the table. You locked our daughter outside barefoot in 10-degree below zero weather. I was teaching her. No. Mom's voice cracked. You were silencing her. Dad reached toward her. She moved her hand away. I watched her through that window, Richard. I should have opened the door. Then Ethan looked at me. I should have too. I didn't rescue either of them from the discomfort. Normally, I would have. Normally, I would have said it was okay because saying that made everyone calm down. This time I simply said, yes, you should have. Ethan lowered his head. Dad's attempted sale never went through. Grandma's attorneys formally notified the prospective buyer that Dad lacked authority to complete the transfer. After the required legal process, Dad also lost his right to remain on the property because his actions had violated the conditions governing his occupancy. There was no dramatic overnight eviction. There didn't need to be. For the first time, deadlines and decisions were happening around Dad that he couldn't control. Months later, I stood behind a safety barrier beside Grandma. The old Carter house was empty. Utility lines had been disconnected. Inspections were complete. Permits were approved. An excavator moved forward. Grandma looked at me. Ready. I watched the machine bite into the wall beside the window, where I'd stood shivering on Christmas Eve. Yes. The demolition wasn't revenge. The house was already scheduled to come down as part of the redevelopment. But watching it disappear meant something to me anyway. For years, Dad had used that house as proof of his authority. His house, his rules, his decision about who belonged inside. Now there was nothing left for him to lock me out of. The redevelopment eventually replaced the deteriorating property with professionally managed residences and community space. Grandma didn't simply hand the project to me because I was family. She offered me a professional role connected to the redevelopment because my architectural background made me qualified to contribute. I accepted. I also moved into my own apartment. Ethan and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, but I made him understand that an apology didn't erase the choice he'd made that night. Mom and I stayed in contact too, with boundaries I had never been willing to enforce before. Dad moved elsewhere. He no longer controlled family gatherings through invitations, property, or money. The following Christmas Eve, Grandma came to my apartment for dinner. Snow fell outside the windows. Halfway through the meal, I disagreed with her about one detail of the redevelopment. For a second, I stopped myself automatically. Grandma noticed. "What?" I smiled. "Nothing. I'm just still getting used to disagreeing with family without being punished for it." She reached for her glass. "Then disagree more often." I laughed. Later that night, I stood beside the window watching snow collect on the street below. A year earlier, I'd been barefoot in weather just like this, staring through another window at a family that had allowed one man to decide whether I belonged inside. Dad thought locking that door proved he had all the power. Instead, it exposed the lie that cost him everything he had been trying to control. The house Richard locked me out of disappeared, but the truth he tried to keep locked inside it survived him.